My name is Roxanne, 34 years old, and I've spent the last decade building a life far away from my controlling family. When I received that invitation for a healing reunion, something felt off, but I ignored my instincts. Big mistake. What was supposed to be reconciliation turned into a public humiliation attempt. But they didn't know I had come prepared with evidence they never expected. Before I tell you how I exposed my family's lies with receipts, they never saw coming comment where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever had to stand up to toxic relatives. I grew up in Mapleton, a small Midwestern town where everyone knew everyone's business or thought they did. My parents, Martha and William Thompson, were masters of maintaining the perfect family facade. Dad worked as a bank manager, Mom was a real estate agent, and together they projected an image of success and wholesome family values to our community. Our colonial style house on Elm Street looked picture perfect from the outside, just like our family photos. Behind closed doors, it was a different story. Every aspect of our lives was controlled: what we wore, who we befriended, how we spent our time. My father monitored our grades with military precision. My mother scrutinized our appearance before any public outing. We were the Thompson children, and we had a reputation to uphold. My older brother James thrived in this environment. 3 years my senior, he excelled at following rules and meeting expectations. He was the golden child captain of the debate team's straight A student and dad's pride and joy. James knew exactly how to gain our parents' approval and wielded his favored status like a weapon when we were alone. My younger sister Amanda, 2 years behind me, became the family peacekeeper. Sensitive and intuitive, she learned early to smooth over tensions and accommodate everyone's needs except her own. She could sense my father's mood shifts before anyone else and would quietly warn us to stay out of his way. Then there was me, the difficult child. I asked too many questions. I challenged inconsistencies. I wanted to know why certain rules existed and why they applied differently to James than to Amanda and me. My curiosity was labeled as defiance, my questions as disrespect. Why does Roxanne always have to make things complicated? My mother would sigh to relatives. She gets this stubbornness from your side of the family. She'd tell my father, who would respond with a stern lecture about gratitude and obedience. Our family struggled financially more than anyone knew. My father's gambling habit drained our resources, but we were forbidden from discussing money problems. We wore secondhand clothes while my parents hosted lavish dinner parties they couldn't afford. The financial strain created a constant undercurrent of tension that erupted in private arguments, but was never acknowledged publicly. College became my escape plan. I studied relentlessly, joined every extracurricular activity that might strengthen my applications, and applied for every scholarship I could find. When I received a full ride to NYU at 18, it should have been a celebration. Instead, it became the final fracture. My father claimed the scholarship was my way of embarrassing the family proof I thought I was too good for them. My mother tearfully accused me of abandoning them. James called me selfish. Only Amanda hugged me goodbye, slipping a small card with a heart drawn inside into my bag. New York was terrifying and exhilarating. I worked 2 jobs while maintaining my scholarship requirements. I changed my major from my father's choice of accounting to marketing, discovering a genuine passion and talent for it. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a respected firm and began climbing the corporate ladder. The distance from my family allowed me to breathe, to discover who I was without their constant criticism. I made real friends who valued my opinions rather than punishing them. I started therapy to unpack the anxiety and self-doubt that followed me from childhood. Over the next decade, I limited contact with my family to brief phone calls on holidays and occasional text messages. I didn't attend family gatherings, making excuses about work commitments that were usually true anyway. I sent birthday and Christmas gifts, but declined invitations to visit. It wasn't a complete cutoff, but it was the boundary I needed to thrive. My career flourished. Last month, I was promoted to Senior Marketing Director at one of New York's top agencies, an achievement that made headlines not just in industry publications, but somehow in the Mapleton Gazette as well. "Local girl makes good in Big Apple," the headline read with a photo from our company website. 3 days after that article ran, Amanda called. We hadn't spoken beyond text messages in almost a year. "Roxy," she said, using my childhood nickname, her voice thick with emotion. We need to talk about the family. She explained that our parents were getting older. Dad had health concerns. The family had been doing some healing work with their church group. Everyone missed me. They regretted how things had gone before I left. We're planning a small family reunion next weekend, she said. Just us at Wilson Park. Mom and Dad have been working through their issues. James has changed too. We all want to make amends. I hesitated, the familiar knot forming in my stomach. I don't know, Amanda. Please? Her voice cracked. Dad's been having heart problems. He might not have many more chances for this. We need to heal as a family. Everyone's made mistakes, Roxy. Even you. That last comment stung, but I pushed it aside. Maybe this was the olive branch I'd secretly hoped for. Maybe they had changed. Maybe I needed this too. Okay, I said finally. I'll come for the weekend. Just the weekend. Thank you, Amanda whispered. This means everything. As I hung up, I felt equal parts hope and dread. Could my family really have changed? Or was I walking back into the same dynamics I'd escaped years ago? The 6-hour drive from New York to Mapleton felt like traveling backward in time. With each passing mile, I felt my confidence wavering, replaced by the familiar anxiety of my childhood. I turned up the music, trying to drown out the voice in my head questioning this decision. I passed the Welcome to Mapleton sign at 4:30 p.m. on Friday. The town looked smaller than I remembered, the main street lined with the same shops, but with fresh paint and new signs. Miller's Pharmacy was now Walgreens. The old cinema had been converted into a craft brewery. But Tony's Diner still stood on the corner, its neon sign flickering just as it always had. Driving down residential streets brought flashbacks of riding my bike to avoid being home, of walking to school with my shoulders hunched against my father's morning criticisms. I passed my elementary school and remembered hiding in the library during lunch periods, finding escape in books when reality became too much. My parents still lived in the same 2-story colonial on Elm Street, though it looked different now. They'd painted it a fashionable gray with white trim instead of the faded blue of my childhood. The landscaping was immaculate with stone pathways and garden lighting that couldn't have been cheap. For a family that had always complained about money, specifically money spent on my education, these renovations seemed oddly extravagant. I parked behind James's BMW and sat for a moment, gathering courage. Beside me on the passenger seat was a small overnight bag. I'd booked a hotel room in town, rather than staying at the house, a decision that had upset Amanda, but felt necessary for my sanity. My mother opened the door before I reached it. Martha Thompson had aged well, her blonde hair now highlighted to cover gray, her figure still slim in expensive-looking jeans and a cashmere sweater. "Roxanne," she said, her smile tight, "you're finally here." No hug, no warmth, just that familiar evaluating gaze that made me feel instantly inadequate. "Hi, Mom," I replied, stepping inside the immaculately kept foyer. The house smelled of cinnamon and furniture polish, just as it always had. My father appeared from his study older and slightly heavier, but still imposing. William Thompson had always commanded attention, his posture military straight, his handshake firm enough to make business associates wince. "So New York finally spared you," he said, which I supposed was his version of a greeting. "James and Amanda are in the living room." The evening that followed was strangely surreal. Everyone was being nice, too nice. My mother kept refilling my wine glass and asking superficial questions about New York, but changing the subject whenever I mentioned my promotion. My father inquired about my little marketing job, as though I were still an entry-level assistant instead of running campaigns for major national brands. James arrived with his wife Danielle, whom I'd never met, and their 2 perfectly behaved children. He was balder and softer around the middle, but his smile still held that superior edge I remembered. He worked at our father's bank, now being groomed to take over the regional manager position. "The prodigal sister returns," he said, clapping me awkwardly on the shoulder. "Still doing the big city thing, huh?" Amanda was the only one who seemed genuinely happy to see me, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She hugged me tightly and kept finding reasons to touch my arm or sit near me. Something about her nervous energy felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Dinner was my mother's specialty beef Wellington, with roasted vegetables and homemade rolls, the meal she'd always prepared for important guests. The conversation remained surface level with strange pauses whenever certain topics arose. No one mentioned the past or any conflicts. No one spoke about reconciliation or healing, despite that being the supposed purpose of my visit. After dinner, I stepped into the hallway to use the bathroom and overheard James on the phone in the study. "Everything's set for tomorrow," he was saying quietly. "Everyone confirmed, 2 o'clock. She doesn't suspect anything." My stomach dropped. What was happening at 2 o'clock? Who had confirmed I slipped back to the dining room before he could catch me eavesdropping? During dessert, I noticed Amanda checking her phone repeatedly, her expression growing increasingly anxious. When I asked if everything was okay, she startled and said, "Just checking on the weather for tomorrow, for our reunion at the park." Later, while helping with dishes, I glimpsed my mother's open Facebook page on her iPad. A cousin I barely remembered had posted, "Looking forward to the special event tomorrow. The Thompson family needs this healing scientific special event." That didn't sound like the small, intimate family gathering Amanda had described. That night, Amanda showed me to my old bedroom, which had been completely redecorated as a home office. No trace remained of my childhood. Not the bulletin board where I'd pinned art projects and certificates. Not the bookshelf that had held my treasured novels. Not even the pale blue paint I'd chosen when I was 12. "Mom repurposed it after you left for college," Amanda explained, not meeting my eyes. "The guest room's down the hall." The guest room was impersonal, but comfortable. After everyone went to bed, I found myself unable to sleep, turning over the strange undercurrents of the evening in my mind. On a hunch, I crept downstairs to the basement where my parents kept old family items. In a dusty box labeled storage, I found a journal I'd kept during high school. Reading through it by phone light, I rediscovered the desperate words of my teenage self planning escape, documenting manipulations, recording broken promises. The journal ended abruptly 3 months before I left for college, when my father had discovered it during one of his room inspections and punished me for my ungrateful attitude. I returned to the guest room with the journal hidden in my bag, a tangible reminder of why I'd kept my distance all these years. Whatever was planned for tomorrow, I needed to be prepared. Instead of the casual outfit Amanda had suggested, just jeans and a t-shirt, we're keeping it super casual. I laid out my charcoal gray business suit, the one I wore to important presentations. I barely slept rehearsing what I might say, how I might respond to whatever scenario awaited. By morning, I'd made a decision I would attend this reunion, but I would be ready for anything. I spent an hour preparing mentally and gathering digital evidence I had fortunately stored in secure cloud folders, old emails, text messages, financial records. Something told me I might need them. By 1:45 p.m. the next day, I knew my instincts had been correct. Instead of heading to Wilson Park as planned, my father announced we needed to make a quick stop at the Mapleton Community Center first. Amanda wouldn't meet my eyes when I questioned the change of plans. James smirked from the driver's seat of his BMW where he was transporting our parents. I followed in my rental car, my anxiety mounting with each turn. The community center parking lot was full, at least 30 cars, where there should have been none for our supposed intimate family gathering. I recognized vehicles belonging to aunts, uncles, and family friends. Even my former high school English teacher's distinctive yellow Volkswagen was there. "What is this?" I asked Amanda as we approached the entrance. She was wearing a dress now, not the casual clothes she'd advised me to bring. "Just trust me," she whispered, her face pale. "Please don't make a scene." The main hall of the community center had been decorated with streamers and a large banner reading "Family Healing Circle." Rows of chairs were arranged in a semicircle facing a microphone stand and projector screen. At least 50 people filled those chairs, extended family members, church friends, former teachers, neighbors, all turning to stare as I entered. My father stepped forward smoothly, taking control as he always did. "Thank you all for coming today," he announced, his voice carrying the authoritative tone I remembered from childhood scoldings. "As you know, our family has been through difficult times. Today is about healing, about addressing hard truths, and finding a path forward together." His eyes locked with mine, challenging. "Some family members have chosen paths that have caused pain to others. Today, we want to give everyone a chance to express that pain, to be heard, and to begin the healing process." It hit me then this wasn't a reunion. It was an intervention, or rather a public humiliation, designed to force me back into line. I stood frozen as the ceremony began. James went first, stepping confidently to the microphone. My sister Roxanne and I were close as children. He began a blatant lie that made my jaw clench. But as we got older, she became increasingly resentful of family expectations. She became secretive and hostile. He pulled out several pages that I recognized with shock as photocopies from my high school journal, the one I thought had been destroyed years ago. In her own words, James continued, she wrote, "I can't wait to escape this prison and never look back." He conveniently omitted the preceding sentences, detailing my father's rage when I'd received a B+ in calculus. My mother followed, tears streaming perfectly down her cheeks without smudging her makeup. We sacrificed everything for our children, she said, voice trembling for maximum effect. We worked extra hours to provide opportunities. We supported their dreams. But Roxanne, her voice broke dramatically. Roxanne abandoned us when we needed her most. She never calls, never visits. She missed her father's 60th birthday and her niece's christening. She acts like she's ashamed of us. No mention of how they'd forbidden me to major in marketing. No mention of the voicemail I still had saved where she told me not to come home for Christmas because I'd chosen to prioritize my career over family. Ms. Winters, my former English teacher, approached the microphone next. I had once trusted her, confiding some of my family's struggles during my senior year. Roxanne was always a challenging student, she said, betraying that confidence completely. Bright but argumentative, unwilling to accept guidance, always believing she knew better than adults who were trying to help her. The ambush continued for 40 excruciating minutes. My uncle described me as too proud to accept family values. My father's pastor spoke about the sin of pride and the importance of honoring one's parents. A family friend recounted how I'd allegedly embarrassed my parents by questioning their church's teachings at a community dinner. The projector displayed carefully selected and sometimes altered evidence of my supposed betrayal. Social media posts taken out of context photos, where I looked angry or sullen as a teenager, emails with certain lines highlighted, and others conveniently cropped out. The final blow came from Amanda, my little sister. The one person I had thought might genuinely miss me approached the microphone with reddened eyes. Roxanne was my hero growing up. She began, her voice small. When she left, she didn't just leave our parents, she left me. She promised she'd always be there for me, but she wasn't. Not when I needed advice for college. Not when I went through my divorce. Not when I struggled with anxiety. Her absence created a hole in our family that we've been trying to fill for 10 years. She paused, the silence heavy. We're not asking for much. Just acknowledgement of the pain she's caused and a commitment to being part of this family again. On our terms. The room applauded as my father returned to the microphone, producing a typed statement. Roxanne, he said, eyes hard despite his gentle tone. We've prepared some thoughts for you to share with everyone. A starting point for healing. He held out the paper, a prepared confession and apology for my selfishness, my abandonment, my failure to appreciate family sacrifices. A script that would invalidate every boundary I'd fought to establish. The room fell silent as I stood, all eyes on me, waiting for my submission. My father gestured to the microphone, his expression confident. This was the moment I was supposed to break down, apologize tearfully, and surrender my autonomy once again. Instead, I walked steadily to my purse and removed my phone and a small adapter. The silence in that community center pressed against my ears as I felt a decade of suppressed fury and pain crystallize into absolute clarity. My hands should have been shaking, but instead they moved with precision born from years of high-stakes presentations. In that moment, I wasn't the scared girl who had fled Mapleton. I was the marketing executive who commanded boardrooms in Manhattan. I thought of Dr. Levine, my therapist of 7 years, and her words about setting boundaries. Boundaries aren't about punishing others, they're about protecting yourself. And sometimes protecting yourself means speaking your truth even when others aren't ready to hear it. As I connected my phone to the projector with the adapter I always carried for work presentations, I made a strategic decision. I wouldn't match their anger with anger. I wouldn't give them the emotional outburst they were anticipating. Instead, I would do what I did best: control the narrative with facts and evidence. I approached the microphone, making eye contact with various audience members. I noticed my mother's sister, Aunt Susan, looking uncomfortable in the third row. I saw my cousin Michael fidgeting with his program. Good. Not everyone was fully committed to this ambush. Thank you all for coming. I began, my voice calm and professional. This is quite a surprise. I was told I was attending a small family reunion at Wilson Park. A murmur rippled through the audience, but I appreciate the opportunity to address everyone at once. I clicked to the first slide, a photo of me at graduation, standing alone in my cap and gown. For those who don't know me well, I'm Roxanne Thompson. I graduated summa cum laude from NYU 10 years ago. This photo was taken by my roommate because no family members attended, despite my sending invitations 2 months in advance. I clicked to a screenshot of an email, my graduation invitation, and my mother's response. We can't possibly attend with your father's work schedule. Don't try to make us feel guilty. I left Mapleton at 18, not to abandon my family, but to pursue education and opportunities. I've been characterized today as selfish and ungrateful. Let me provide some context. The next slide showed a spreadsheet, my college financial records. I received a full academic scholarship that covered tuition. I worked 20 hours weekly at the campus bookstore and another 15 as a waitress to pay for housing and food. I graduated with $200 in student loans, which I paid off within 2 years. My parents contributed zero to my education, despite the college fund I'd been told existed throughout my childhood. I clicked to an image of a bank statement. This is the bank account my parents opened when I was born for my education. By the time I was 17, the balance was $238.72. I've never received an explanation for what happened to the monthly deposits I watched my father make throughout my childhood. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. He started to stand, but my mother grabbed his arm, whispering urgently. I continued displaying a text message exchange with my mother from 3 years ago. When I was considered for my first major promotion, I reached out to share the news. This was the response. That's nice, dear. Did you get the Christmas card we sent with James's family photo? Amanda's having a hard time since the divorce. We could use some financial help with her bills if you're doing so well. Next came a series of holiday photos, me alone in my apartment on Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter. Beside each, I placed family photos from social media of the celebrations I hadn't been invited to. I've been accused of missing family events. These are the invitations I received to major family gatherings in the past 5 years. The slide was tellingly blank. I displayed screenshots of text messages I'd sent on birthdays, graduations, and anniversaries, many with no response or one-word answers. I've been accused of not caring about my sister during her divorce. I clicked to a bank statement showing monthly transfers to Amanda for the past 2 years. I've sent Amanda $400 monthly since her divorce was finalized. She asked me not to tell anyone in the family. Amanda's sharp intake of breath was audible in the silent room. I turned a page in the physical journal I'd retrieved from the basement. James read selected passages from my teenage journal. Let me share some he didn't select. Dad threw away my art school applications again. Said no daughter of his would waste her life drawing pictures. Mom found them in the trash and handed them back to me in secret, but warned me not to cross him. I looked directly at James. Or this one, James told Dad I was talking to Eric after school. Dad took away my phone for 2 weeks and called Eric's parents to say I wasn't allowed to speak to him. James laughed when I cried. I played a voicemail from my mother declining my invitation to visit New York. Your father doesn't approve of your lifestyle there, and frankly, neither do I. When you decide to move back home where you belong and stop this nonsense, we'll discuss visiting. The final piece of evidence was the hardest, a letter my father had written when I received my scholarship. If you accept this scholarship and leave, you are choosing to reject this family and everything we stand for. Don't expect our support. Don't expect to be welcomed back unless you're ready to admit your mistake and live by our values. I looked up from reading. I was 18 years old being told that pursuing higher education was rejecting my family. I set down my phone and faced the room. I didn't abandon my family. I escaped an environment that was crushing me. I've spent years in therapy unpacking the anxiety, the self-doubt, and the fear that was instilled in me. I've reached out repeatedly over the years, sending gifts messages and offers to visit on neutral ground. Most were rejected or ignored. I turned to my parents directly. I love you both despite everything. I always will. But love doesn't require submission. It doesn't require erasing myself to make you comfortable. It doesn't require accepting blame for choices I made to protect my mental health and future. I addressed the room once more. I came here today hoping for genuine reconciliation. Instead, I found a carefully orchestrated public shaming. That's not healing. That's control. I disconnected my phone from the projector. If anyone here wants a relationship with me based on mutual respect and truth, I'm open to that. My contact information hasn't changed. But I will not apologize for building a life that brings me joy and peace, even if that life doesn't match someone else's expectations. The silence that followed was deafening. Chaos erupted the moment I finished speaking. My father lunged for the projector, yanking cords from the wall, as if erasing the electronic evidence could undo the truth I'd just revealed. His face had progressed from red to nearly purple, the vein in his forehead pulsing visibly in a way that reminded me of countless childhood confrontations. "This is outrageous!" he shouted, his voice booming through the community center. "Roxanne has always twisted things to make herself the victim. These are private family matters that have been taken completely out of context." My mother collapsed into dramatic sobs, covering her face with her hands, while simultaneously peeking through her fingers to gauge the room's reaction. "How could you be so cruel?" she wailed. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us." James attempted to seize the microphone, his lawyer persona taking over as he tried to regain control of the narrative. "My sister has always had a flair for the dramatic," he said with a forced chuckle. "What she's not telling you is how much support our parents provided, emotional support, life guidance, values that she's clearly rejected." The audience had fractured into pockets of shocked whispers and uncomfortable shifting. Several elderly church friends gathered around my mother, patting her shoulder and glaring in my direction. But others stood awkwardly by the refreshment table, clearly uncertain what to believe. My cousin Lisa and her husband quietly gathered their coats and slipped out the side door, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Uncle Robert, my father's brother, stared at his shoes, his expression unreadable. Three of my mother's bridge club friends huddled near the exit, their expressions scandalized yet riveted by the unfolding drama. Amanda remained frozen in her chair, tears streaming silently down her face. When our eyes met, she mouthed what looked like "I'm sorry," but made no move to stand by me publicly. The most surprising reaction came from Aunt Susan, my mother's older sister. They had always had a strained relationship with Susan, being the more independent of the two. She rose from her seat and walked deliberately to stand beside me. "I believe Roxanne," she announced, her voice carrying across the murmuring crowd. "Martha William, this event was wrong from the start. You ambushed your daughter instead of having an honest conversation." Mr. Grayson, an elderly neighbor who had known me since childhood, stood up shakily using his cane. "I always wondered why that bright little girl stopped smiling around age 12, he said. "William, I respected you as a colleague, but this display today has changed that." Mrs. Winters, my former teacher who had spoken against me earlier, approached with a conflicted expression. "Roxanne, I didn't know the full context of your family situation. What I witnessed as a teacher was only part of the picture. I apologize for making assumptions." My father, seeing the tide turning, resorted to his most reliable tactic, authoritarian anger. "That's enough," he thundered. "Everyone who is not immediate family needs to leave now. This is a private Thompson family matter." His outburst only confirmed everything I'd revealed about his controlling nature. Several more people stood and began gathering their belongings, muttering disapprovingly. Mother tried a different approach, rising tearfully to appeal to the departing guests. "Please understand, we only wanted to help our daughter. She's been so distant, so unwilling to be part of this family. We're heartbroken parents who just want their child back." James, always quick to align with the dominant family power, stood behind our parents with arms crossed, attempting to project unified strength. But the cracks were showing his confident smirk had vanished, replaced by a tight-lipped grimace, as he watched their carefully constructed narrative crumble. Amanda finally found her courage rising from her seat to approach me. Roxy, I didn't know this was what they planned. I mean, I knew about the gathering, but not the extent of it. They told me it was going to be a chance for everyone to share feelings and move forward. I looked at my sister, still caught in the family dynamic, still trying to please everyone, still making excuses for inexcusable behavior. You had multiple opportunities to warn me, Amanda. You chose not to. I was scared, she whispered. You don't know what it's been like since you left. I do know, I replied quietly. That's why I offered to help you move to Chicago last year. The offer still stands when you're ready to make your own choices. I turned to address my parents one last time, keeping my voice level, despite the emotion threatening to break through. I didn't come here to destroy our family. I came hoping for genuine connection. What you planned today has shown me that's not possible right now. I won't be manipulated or shamed into being someone I'm not. I gathered my purse and jacket, acutely aware of all eyes on me. I'm staying at the Mapleton Inn through tomorrow morning if anyone wants to have an actual conversation. With that, I walked calmly toward the exit, Aunt Susan's hand supportively at my elbow. As the door closed behind us, I heard my father's voice rise again, attempting to salvage the situation by blaming my emotional instability. But the damage was done. In the parking lot, my composure finally cracked. I leaned against my rental car hands, shaking as delayed adrenaline surged through my system. Take a deep breath. Aunt Susan advised, her hand steady on my shoulder. You did beautifully in there. It took tremendous courage. I need to leave, I managed to say, fumbling for my keys. You shouldn't drive like this, she said firmly. Let me take you for coffee to settle your nerves. My car's right there. As we pulled away from the community center, I watched several more people exiting, including my cousin Michael and his wife, who spotted us and gave a small supportive wave. The family tapestry, woven of secrecy and control for so many years, had begun to unravel, and surprisingly, I felt not satisfaction, but a profound, complicated grief for what could have been and what might still be possible with those willing to build something new from the threads. I gripped the steering wheel of my rental car so tightly, my knuckles turned white as I drove away from the coffee shop where Aunt Susan had taken me. The initial shock had worn off, leaving me hollow and trembling. 2 blocks from the community center, I pulled into the empty parking lot of Mapleton Elementary School and finally let the tears come. I cried for the little girl who had tried so hard to earn love that should have been unconditional. I cried for the teenager who wrote desperate journal entries by flashlight. I cried for the college student who checked her phone every holiday hoping for a message that never came. I cried until my throat hurt and my eyes burned. When my phone rang, I almost didn't answer. The screen showed Aunt Susan. Roxanne, are you all right? You left rather suddenly. I'm okay, I managed. Just needed some space. I understand completely. Her voice softened. Listen, I'm at Cornerstone Cafe with Michael and his wife Beth, and Lisa and her husband joined us too. We'd love for you to come back if you're up to it. I hesitated, surprised. You're all together? Yes, and we have some things to tell you that you should probably hear. 30 minutes later, I sat in a corner booth at Cornerstone Cafe, surrounded by relatives who had been little more than Christmas card signatures for years. Aunt Susan, my mother's sister, who had moved to Columbus after a falling out years ago. Cousin Michael, who had once been close to James but had distanced himself after college. His wife Beth, whom I'd never met before today. Cousin Lisa and her husband David, who lived just outside Mapleton, but rarely attended family functions. First, Michael said, leaning forward, what happened today was wrong. Ambushing you like that was cruel and manipulative. Lisa nodded. We were told it was a surprise welcome home party with a chance to reconnect. The whole healing circle thing wasn't mentioned until we arrived. Your parents have been telling everyone for years that you cut them off completely, Aunt Susan explained. That you refused to speak to them, returned their gifts, rejected their attempts to visit you. Based on what you showed today, that was clearly a lie. They've played the heartbroken abandoned parents to perfection, Michael added. Christmas dinners always include a toast to absent family with meaningful looks and your mother's tears. What you may not know, Aunt Susan continued stirring her tea, is that your parents have been manipulating the extended family financially for years. Your father has borrowed money from nearly everyone, citing medical bills, Amanda's divorce expenses, and even claiming they were sending you financial support in New York. My jaw dropped. They've been claiming they support me. Beth, Michael's wife, nodded. They told everyone at last year's Easter gathering that they'd helped you through a rough patch when you were between jobs. Said they'd sent you thousands to keep you afloat. I've never been between jobs, I said, anger replacing shock. And they've never sent me a dime since I left for college. We know that now, Lisa said. Your evidence made that pretty clear. But they've been using you as both the villain and the victim in their stories, depending on what gets them sympathy or money. Michael ran a hand through his hair. The real catalyst for today's event wasn't about healing at all. It was your promotion. My promotion, I repeated, confused. When that article ran in the Mapleton Gazette about your success, Aunt Susan explained, people started asking questions. If you were doing so well, why did your parents need loans? If you were this big marketing executive, why did they claim you were financially struggling? The inconsistencies in their stories started showing. They needed to discredit you, Lisa said bluntly. They needed to show everyone that despite your professional success, you were a damaged, ungrateful daughter who had caused them years of emotional and financial hardship. The pieces clicked into place. So they orchestrated this whole thing to make me look unstable and themselves like victims. Exactly, Aunt Susan confirmed, but it backfired spectacularly. We talked for over 2 hours. I learned that my parents had borrowed over $30,000 from various family members in the past 5 years, that Amanda had been pressured to move back home after her divorce, and now worked at my father's bank under James's supervision, that James had leveraged family connections to avoid consequences for a DUI last year. Most surprisingly, I discovered relatives who genuinely wanted to know me, the real me, not the distorted version my parents had presented all these years. As the cafe began to close, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Mrs. Jensen from the community center event. Several of us are meeting for breakfast tomorrow at Denny's at 9 a.m. if you'd like to join. We owe you an apology. I showed it to Aunt Susan, who squeezed my hand. The truth has a way of finding daylight, doesn't it? Before we left, we exchanged phone numbers and social media contacts, promising to stay connected regardless of family politics. For the first time, I felt like I had actual family in Mapleton, not just blood relatives. Back at my hotel room, I found 3 voicemails waiting. One from my father, his voice tight with barely controlled anger, demanding I call immediately to fix the mess you've made. One from my mother, crying about how I'd humiliated them in front of everyone. And one from Amanda. Roxy, it's me. Can we talk? Please, I'm so sorry. I didn't know they were planning all that. I mean, I knew about the gathering, but not the ambush part. I'm at the Willow Cafe across from your hotel. I'll wait until 9. Please come. It was 8:42 p.m. I stared at the phone, conflicted. Amanda had betrayed my trust, but she was also trapped in the family system I'd escaped. After a moment's hesitation, I grabbed my keycard and headed downstairs. The Willow Cafe was nearly empty. Amanda sat in a corner booth, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, eyes red from crying. She looked up as the bell above the door announced my arrival, relief washing over her face. You came, she whispered as I slid into the booth across from her. I almost didn't, I admitted. Amanda nodded, hands wrapped around a cooling mug of tea. I would have deserved that. Why, Amanda? Why didn't you warn me? She stared into her mug. They said they just wanted a chance to clear the air. Dad said everyone missed you, and this was the only way to get you to hear them out. Mom said you'd be defensive in a small setting. And you believed that I wanted to, she whispered. They've been different since you left. Harder, colder. Dad watches everything I do. Mom criticizes constantly. James reports back to them if I do anything they wouldn't approve of. It's like they're afraid of losing control of another daughter. So you set me up to protect yourself. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I was a coward. I've always been a coward. Not like you. I sighed, the anger I'd felt toward her softening slightly. It wasn't courage that got me out, Amanda. It was desperation. For the next hour, we talked honestly for the first time in a decade. Amanda revealed that our parents were in significant debt despite their renovated home and new cars. Dad had gambling problems that had worsened. Mom spent compulsively to maintain appearances. They were deeply jealous of my success and independence. They talk about you all the time, she confessed. Not to your face, obviously, but to each other. They Google you. They follow your company on social media. Dad gets furious when he sees announcements about your promotions or awards. And the money I've been sending you, she looked away ashamed. They take most of it. They convinced me I owe them for letting me move back home after the divorce. You're 32, Amanda. You don't need their permission to live your own life. Easy for you to say. You've always been stronger. I reached across the table and took her hand. No, I was just scared enough of disappearing completely that I had to leave. You can find that courage too. We parted with a tentative plan. I would help her apply for jobs in Chicago where I had connections. She would start setting aside money in a private account. We would text regularly, rebuilding the sister relationship that our parents had systematically undermined. As I walked her to her car, she hugged me fiercely. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to stand up for you today. There's still time to be brave, I told her. Your life isn't over. It can actually just be beginning. Back in my hotel room, I sat by the window, looking out at the Mapleton Water Tower, illuminated against the night sky. Tomorrow I would have breakfast with people who wanted to apologize. Then I would drive back to New York, back to the life I had built for myself. This weekend hadn't brought the family reconciliation I might have secretly hoped for. Instead, it had brought something unexpected, but perhaps more valuable: truth, clarity, and the beginnings of connections with family members who saw me for who I really was. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. Thank you for not giving up on me. For the first time since arriving in Mapleton, I smiled genuinely as I typed my response. Family doesn't give up on family, the real kind of family that is. A week after returning to New York, I sat in Dr. Levine's office for our regular Tuesday session. The comfortable leather chair, the soft lighting, the faint scent of lavender all felt especially welcoming after the emotional turbulence of Mapleton. So, Doctor, Levine said, peering over her reading glasses, you confronted your family with evidence rather than emotion. That's significant progress from where we started 7 years ago. I smiled faintly. Progress feels like an understatement. The old Roxanne would have either avoided the event entirely or broken down in tears. Tell me about the aftermath. How have you been processing the experience? I described the complicated emotions that had followed me back to New York: relief at having finally spoken my truth, grief for the family relationships that might never heal, guilt over Amanda's situation, and a surprising sense of freedom. It's like I've been carrying this invisible weight, I explained, always wondering if I was the villain in our family story. Having concrete evidence that I wasn't imagining things, that I wasn't the problem, and having others witness that it's liberating. The week since my return had been filled with unexpected connections. Aunt Susan called twice to check in. Cousin Michael sent family photos from before my parents' estrangement from the extended family. 3 former neighbors emailed apologies for believing my parents' version of events for so long. Most significantly, I'd received 12 text messages from Amanda, ranging from mundane daily updates to deeper reflections on our shared childhood. She'd already applied for 2 jobs in Chicago and had opened a separate bank account my parents didn't know about. My parents predictably had cycled through various tactics to regain control. First came my father's angry voicemails demanding I fix the situation. When those went unanswered, my mother tried guilt. Your father's blood pressure is dangerously high because of the stress you've caused. Finally came James's condescending text about family loyalty and keeping private matters private. I responded to none of them directly. instead sending a single email outlining my boundaries. I was open to individual conversations based on mutual respect, but I would not engage with manipulation guilt or public relations management. The most surprising thing, I told Dr. Levine, is that I don't feel angry anymore. I expected to be furious after all that happened, but instead, I just feel clear. Like I can finally see the situation for what it is without the fog of self-doubt. Dr. Levine nodded. That clarity is what we've been working toward. Anger is often a response to confusion and powerlessness. When you claimed your narrative and set clear boundaries, you reclaimed your power. We spent the rest of the session discussing strategies for maintaining those boundaries, especially regarding Amanda. I was determined to support her without enabling the dysfunctional family dynamics I'd escaped. Back in my apartment that evening, I did something I'd been contemplating all week. I created a private online photo album titled Thompson Family Truth. Into it, I uploaded all the evidence I'd collected over the years: emails, text messages, financial records, journal entries. I added detailed context for each item, creating a comprehensive record that could never be dismissed as misremembered or exaggerated. I didn't share this album with anyone. Its purpose wasn't revenge or exposure. It was a personal archive, a validation of my experience and protection against future gaslighting. Simply knowing it existed, organized and undeniable, reinforced the boundaries I'd established. The following Sunday, Aunt Susan called with news that rippled through our extended family network. My parents had announced they were taking a break from hosting family gatherings to focus on personal healing. A translation, they were retreating to regroup now that their carefully constructed narrative had collapsed. William's quite isolated at the moment, she reported. Several bank board members were at that disaster of an intervention, and they're asking uncomfortable questions about financial discrepancies he can't easily explain. I felt no satisfaction at their predicament, only sadness that they'd created this situation through years of manipulation and control. As October turned to November, my life in New York continued its positive trajectory. I received another promotion at work, moving into the executive leadership team. I maintained regular contact with Amanda, Aunt Susan, and several cousins. I even had a surprisingly pleasant phone conversation with Mrs. Winters, my former teacher, who apologized again for her role in the intervention and shared memories of my academic achievements she had genuinely admired. When Thanksgiving approached, I faced the familiar holiday dilemma. In previous years, I'd either worked through the holiday or accepted invitations from friends, always carrying the weight of family estrangement beneath forced holiday cheer. This year was different. Aunt Susan called in early November with an invitation. "I'm hosting Thanksgiving at my place in Columbus," she said. "Nothing fancy, just good food and better company. Michael and Beth will be there, Lisa and David too, and Amanda has already confirmed she's coming." Amanda? I was surprised. How did she manage that? She told your parents she's spending it with her in-laws from her previous marriage. They didn't question it because they're still in social hibernation mode. I smiled at my sister's newfound subterfuge skills. Count me in. That Thanksgiving became the first of many reimagined family gatherings. In my apartment the following spring, I hosted a small dinner for Amanda, who had successfully interviewed for a marketing coordinator position in Chicago, and 3 cousins, who happened to be visiting New York. We created new traditions based on mutual respect rather than obligation. We shared honestly rather than performing prescribed roles. We supported each other's growth instead of enforcing compliance. 1 year after the infamous intervention, I received a formal letter from my parents. The stiff language and formal tone suggested my father's authorship, though it bore both their signatures. We have reflected on past events and recognized that different perspectives exist regarding our family history. While we maintain that our intentions have always been to protect our family's well-being, we acknowledge that our methods may have caused unintended distress. We are open to resuming contact under mutually agreed parameters. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a full acknowledgement of reality. But it was a retreat from their previous position of absolute rightness, the closest thing to compromise they were capable of offering. After discussing it with Dr. Levine, I responded with equal formality, accepting their opening for limited contact while maintaining my boundaries. We established a monthly phone call, always scheduled in advance, with explicit agreement that manipulation or guilt tactics would end the call immediately. These conversations were strained and superficial, but they existed a narrow bridge across a wide chasm. James remained distant, occasionally joining these calls, but never engaging directly with me. My mother gradually softened, though she never fully acknowledged the past. My father maintained a cool politeness that neither admitted fault nor sought genuine connection. It wasn't the warm reconciliation Hollywood might script. It was messier, more complicated, and ultimately more authentic. Meanwhile, my relationship with Amanda blossomed. She moved to Chicago that summer, taking the marketing position and finding an apartment 20 minutes from the train station to New York. We visited each other monthly, making up for lost time and building the adult sister relationship we'd been denied. The extended family network strengthened as well. Holidays rotated between various homes, never returning to my parents' carefully controlled domain. Information flowed freely without being filtered through my parents' distorted lens. By the second anniversary of the intervention, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. Professionally, I continued to thrive. Personally, I had built a network of family relationships based on truth rather than performance. Emotionally, I had found peace not through forgetting the past, but by incorporating it honestly into my understanding of myself. The journey hadn't been easy. Setting and maintaining boundaries required constant vigilance and occasional reinforcement. There were still difficult conversations, still moments of grief for what might have been. But beneath it all ran a steady current of self-respect and authenticity that no family drama could wash away. True healing, I discovered, wasn't about erasing pain or pretending it never happened. It wasn't about perfect relationships or storybook endings. It was about standing firmly in your truth, even when others resist it. It was about creating connections based on mutual respect rather than control. It was about finding family, both biological and chosen, who value you for who you actually are, not who they demand you to be. True family isn't about blood, it's about respect, truth, and the courage to protect your boundaries even when it hurts. Have you ever had to stand up to family pressure or set boundaries with loved ones? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If my journey resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real talk about family dynamics and personal growth. Remember that your truth matters, and sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we're born into. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it gives strength to anyone facing similar challenges.